Okay, so good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you this evening. My name is Jo Jarvis. I work at the Open University. I've worked there for about 10 years in various different research and teaching roles. I'm currently what's referred to as a staff tutor. So I have the great pleasure of line managing the associate lecturers, and those, of course, in turn support groups of students. So as I'm sure you can imagine, with the pandemic going on at the moment, I'm meeting all sorts of interesting new challenges that I wouldn't normally do so. But this evening I want to concentrate very much on the sort of astronomy side of my life, which is something I've been extremely passionate about since I was really quite young. And in fact, Dave has known me from a very young age when I was first cutting my teeth on astronomy. So I want to talk to you specifically about a trip that I took to Tenerife. It was back in May of 2019, and it was essentially a very, very busy week. So I travelled with a gentleman called Alan Kalis, who's a very good friend of mine, and a fellow staff tutor and astronomy addict at the Open University. We were going to do filming for various courses and other resources linked with the Pirate and Coast telescopes that are out there, both of which are owned by the Open University. I was also doing some filming for Scott Primary School, which is the other half of my life, where I'm a science specialist at a primary school that's local to me. And we were also linking up with a school trip coming from Denny High School. Why they were out there, I will tell you more about a bit later on. And having done all that work, Alan and I certainly felt that we deserved a little bit of a holiday. So you have two different ways of looking at this presentation. Hopefully you will consider it quite an interesting thing to see and to learn about. But you could also argue it's an opportunity for me to share my holiday snaps. So a little bit of orientation first. The flight time from the UK is about 4.5 hours to go all the way down to Tenerife. So for those of you whose geography maybe isn't that great, there's the UK. I'm hoping you know that one. And then right down the bottom here, we've got Tenerife, just off of the west coast of Africa. Now that flight, as I'm sure you can imagine, going to a nice tropical island, you are often accompanied by stag and hen do's on the plane, which can make things, let's just say, interesting sometimes. Generally, it's a lot quieter from them on the way back. So this is a picture I actually took from the aeroplane. Flying in. The flight path, you always go from the UK, obviously, travelling south, and you tend to go down the west coast of the island and then curve around, fly across the south coast to come round to the airport. So this is just flying across the south of the island. And so you get this beautiful sort of almost 360 view as you fly around of the island and of the Teide volcano that you can see peeking up in the middle there and just catching the sun at sunset. Again, another little bit of orientation. So this is the island of Tenerife. Some of you may have been there before. The island itself is about 60 miles long on its longest dimension. The international airport that we're flying into is down at the bottom here, down in the south. And then the Mount Teide volcano itself is right in the middle of the island there. So the island is varying, as I say, 60 meters in length and varying between about 30 miles to 10 miles wide. So it's not a particularly big island. You know, you can happily drive from one end to the other, assuming you're using the motorway that you can see running along the east coast there, in about an hour and a half or so. So the Mount Teide volcano itself is at about 3,700 meters above sea level, and is actually the 4th highest volcano in the world. So it's really quite impressive once you get up there. Now, as you can imagine, driving up to the volcano, you've got your classic wiggly road to get up there. And of course, they've had to cut into the side of the volcano to build that road. And so we stopped one day on a slightly precarious bend to take this fantastic image of the rock strata that you can see, obviously been laid down over many, many years, decades, and indeed centuries. Now, Teide is technically still an active volcano. So again, as I'm sure you can appreciate, this makes risk assessments kind of interesting. The last eruption, however, was on the 18th of November 1909, so a little while ago now. That said, it's said to have some level of eruption about every 100 years. So we're overdue something. Now that 1909 eruption was actually out of the sort of northwest side of the volcano, not out of the main peak, so it wasn't a particularly dramatic one. The last major eruption, which was in fact the one that basically blew the top off the whole island, was 150,000 years ago. So we're really hoping that it doesn't do anything like that anytime soon, because that resulted in the 10-mile wide Caldera, which now contains what we think of as the peak of the volcano. So it was once much, much bigger. Now, being astronomers, being scientists, we have to go and explore. It's in our blood. And so in addition to going up to the observatories to actually do some proper work, we decided to go on a little bit of a sightseeing tour. And so we've hired a car. And this is a picture taken from inside the Caldera. So I'm standing taking this picture with the peak of the volcano behind me. And what you're actually looking at there is the floor of the Caldera. And then in the distance, the sort of mountain range you can see is actually the edge of the Caldera. So that is part of the original wall of the much, much larger volcano. So extrapolate that up, sort of way up above my head, and you've got the size that the volcano once was. Now, moving around inside this caldera, it's almost like being on Mars. You can see the colour of the rocks is really quite red. There's very, very little in the way of vegetation, certainly across this main caldera. And there's lots and lots of different rock types, and it's a geologist's dream. It really is. I'm not even going to pretend to know most of the geology behind this, but I found it absolutely spectacular. Now, the peak, the caldera, and the surrounding area is all part of the Teide National Park, and this area is protected. So they are really very, very careful about what development, if any, is made inside that area. It is, however, all open to the public, with the exception of the absolute peak of the volcano. To go right to the very, very top, you need a permit from the government. But I'm pleased to say, and sounding quite smug, that myself and Alan managed to get one. So we did quite a bit of sort of video journaling whilst we were there. So I'll take you on our little journey up to the peak of the volcano. So this is us taking a look at it from below. And our final destination, on our drive anyway, into the caldera is this cable car base. That is at about 2,300 meters and is quite a major tourist attraction. So you can see I'm standing here with the cable car coming down over my head into that cable car base. And of course, eventually it was our turn. You'll be pleased to know I've sped this up. You don't actually get quite this much of a roller coaster ride. It actually takes about 8 minutes to do the journey. And you are traveling up from about 2,300 meters to about 3,500 meters. So you're still a couple of hundred meters short of the summit. Now, the last bit we have to do is obviously climbing on foot. So you can see as we come into the base here, lots of people wandering around up there. This is as far as most people get. Without the permit, you can't go any further. You see you've got paths built there to help people look around. But we headed up that bit further. So this is us now continuing our journey on foot up for those last couple of 100 meters. Now it started on quite a nice path, but it certainly didn't stay that way. And it proved to be very, very hard work because we're at quite an altitude at this point. We've only got about 50% of the oxygen that you would be used to at sea level. So you're puffing and panting even standing still. Now we've got some proof here that this is indeed an active volcano, and this is my colleague Alan. We've made it right to the very top. He's looking rather pleased with himself, making use of his GoPro there. But you can see as he pans round the extent of the island and the extent of the caldera. And then we take a look right down into what is the new caldera of the smaller peak, not nearly as dramatic. As you can see, there are a small group of people up at the top. They allow about 10 people to go up at a time. And you do have to go up with a guide. And from the top, we could see the observatory. So this is where we'd be spending the rest of our time on this trip. And just to complete the picture, this is us now at the observatory looking back at the Teide volcano. And again, on the left-hand side there, you can see those that mountain range, that edge of the original caldera. So again, think of taking that line and extrapolating upwards way above the existing peak as to how big that volcano once was. Okay, so let's get on to some astronomy. Now, the Teide Observatory itself is run by the IAC, and that's the same group that run the telescopes on the island of Palma and various other locations as well. The observatory is about 2,400 meters and is home to lots and lots of telescopes from around the world. You've got solar telescopes from Germany, from France, and from the UK. You've also got the more classic nocturnal telescopes from the UK, Belgium, Spain. The European Space Agencies, you can see I've marked there, have got one of its optical ground stations at the observatory. Germany there have got their vacuum tower telescopes, a solar facility. You've also got telescopes from Russia. There's also a few radio telescopes up there as well, so there's quite a big variety. Now, these are the two observatories that are owned and run by the Open University. The reason that I've been so heavily involved in these is because originally the Pirate telescope was based on the island of Majorca, and that was the prototype. And I was quite heavily involved in that, spending a lot of time getting the hardware working, getting the software working, and then persuading the two to talk to each other. And doing an awful lot of electronics and rewiring of things, which for those of you with your own observatories, I'm sure you've experienced the fun of that. But having gone through that prototype phase, Pirate moved to Tenerife and we built the sister facility Coast. So Coast is the one in the foreground, and Coast stands for Completely Autonomous Service Telescope. And then Pirate, you've got there in the background, is the Physics Innovations Robotic Astronomical Telescope Explorer. So you will never guess what. We thought of the acronym first and then came up with words to go with it. A classic astronomer's way of doing things. Now, as you can see from this fantastic sunrise picture, the observatory is placed well above the typical cloud layer. Certainly, I remember on that particular sunrise, I almost felt like I could walk down the side of the mountain and just carry on walking across the surface of the clouds there. It was absolutely stunning. Completely still, almost entirely silent, apart from the tweet of the odd little bird every now and again. Because the observatory is well above the cloud level, during the summer about 75% of nights are clear, and at other times it can get to well over 90% of nights being clear. So try not to get too jealous, but it does prove the point of why we have our observatories there. Of course, the height also gets us above much of the atmosphere, removing extinction issues and all the sort of turbulence and so forth that will affect images. So I'll take you on a little bit of a tour. As you can see at the observatory site, we've got a little bit more foliage. So this is walking up the path. I've got coast behind me. Well, I say behind me. That's me sitting at the bottom of the mast there. So this is Alan filming this. And we're looking at the Pirate telescope. On that mast that I'm sitting at the bottom of, that's actually our weather instruments, recording the conditions and, of course, acting as a bit of a fail-safe for the observatory. This is the Pirate telescope. It's a 17-inch telescope, and it's got direct remote control option as well as a completely autonomous scheduling mode, so it doesn't need people at all, basically. And it is used exclusively for teaching, for undergraduates within the Open University, research on variable stars, exoplanets, transits, and various other transiting objects as well. You can see it's got a clamshell style dome, which is much, much simpler to operate, and of course also allows us to react much more quickly should we get any targets of opportunity, because of course we don't have to worry about rotating the dome, we just need to move the telescope. And the telescope itself, as you can see on the back of it there, is equipped with a high-resolution CCD camera and a variety of broadband and narrowband filters, allowing your standard both monochrome and bicomposite colour images as well. So this is the research facility. And so this is the Pirate in the foreground here, Coast in the background this time. And Coast is very, very similar to Pirate. It's slightly smaller, it's 14-inch, but is also operated remotely, has the same direct operation and autonomous mode. And in fact, it's only just been released publicly that the Pirate telescope, as soon as all the travel restrictions and so forth are out the way, the Pirate telescope is actually going to go through quite a major upgrade, up to a 24-inch. And therefore the existing 17-inch Pirate will become Coast. So Coast will effectively get an upgrade from 14 to 17 inches. So we're all quite excited about that happening, and just need the travel restrictions to get out of the way so we can get on with it. Now, I thought it'd be quite interesting for you to see sort of a typical night of operation. Okay, so I hope that gives you an impression of what the observatory gets up to, or both observatories get up to overnight. We did film that on a night which obviously was not ideal for astronomy, since we had the full moon. But frankly, without the moon's illumination, you wouldn't be able to see the domes. So we had to go for a little bit of artistic license with that one. Now, the other way that Coast differs from Pirate is the fact that it is dedicated to use by the public and public engagement and education. And one of the main ways in that is facilitated is with the free course Astronomy with an Online Telescope. Now, I believe this got mentioned by someone, I'm sorry, I can't remember who, quite a while ago now during one of these meetings. So thank you very much for that. But this, for those of you that don't know, this course is an 8-week course, though you can start and finish whenever you like. There is, no schedule that you need to stick to, so you can do it as quickly or as slowly as you like, and slowly progress through the content of the course. It's a badged course, which means that there is assessment during the course, but it's fairly simple, sort of multiple choice questions, just to make sure that what you've been reading has sunk in, and you then get the rather natty looking little digital badge there that you can see on the top left of the image to add to your profile on OpenLearn. And there's a whole series of those that they're clumping together to make a suite of courses, so you can gain huge amounts of knowledge and recognition of what you're learning as well. Now, the objectives of this particular course is to learn your way around the night sky. So we're assuming that we're working with novice astronomers, though it does obviously pick up as we go through the course. To understand telescopes, and particularly in the context of COAST, to actually learn how to use it, and also to contribute to a citizen science project. So I'm not expecting you to read all of this, don't worry. I just wanted to show you some examples of the course content. So in the first 4 weeks, you learn your way around the night sky. We use Stellarium for this, a bit of software that quite a few of you might be familiar with. We learn about using binoculars for astronomy, and then progress onto telescopes in general, and eventually COAST itself. We learn about stellar magnitudes and how to actually go about planning observations, both naked eye observations and those done with a telescope. And then we go on to learn about Messier objects, and it's those Messier objects that are used to take your first images with the COAST telescope. So you're taught how to interact with the telescope.org interface to actually submit your requests for observations to the COAST telescope, and then those images are returned to you. And given I know I'm talking to some fairly advanced astronomers here, you have options to simply accept the defaults, and you will get a color image back that the software has processed itself, or indeed you can request the individual filters and your flat fields, darks, biases, etc., so you can actually build up your and process your own images. But bear in mind that the course is also designed to be accessible to complete beginners as well. So we've got the two options there. And in the second part of the course, again, I'm not expecting you to read all of this, just wanted to show you an example. This is the second 4 weeks now. We look at the sun as a star, what fuels it, etc., the process of stellar evolution. We look at variable stars and why they might be varying. Again, we look in a bit more detail at planning observations when your focus is not so much pretty pictures but more science. And then we use that knowledge to undertake some aperture photometry, so actually measuring the luminosity of stars and contributing to a citizen science project which is building up a light curve of a variable star. So when you've gotten to that point, you've got your you've done your analysis, you'll be contributing to a light curve of one of many stars that you can choose from. And I just wanted to share with you some of the results that we've got so far. Every single one of the dots on here is a separate person. that has contributed. As you'll see in a minute, there are quite a few different stars to contribute to, which is why there maybe doesn't appear to be that much data on this one graph. And you'll always know which data points are yours, because in the middle there, hopefully you can see that you've got a few dots marked in red. And so they are the observations taken by me when I actually created this little clip. So you can see here we've got EA3, we've got the light curve developing there. These are all your different stars. We've got EA4, you see we've got a lovely dip there at 0.5. This is obviously a folded light curve. And then EW1, fabulous looking sinusoidal curve there. So this is slowly building up. The project has been available to the general public for about 9 months now, but obviously it went through an initial testing phase when it was very first released. So I'd say people have actually been contributing data to these plots, perhaps for sort of 5 or 6 months. So so we're quite pleased with how far it's got so far. Now, the course is unique in a whole variety of different ways, not least of which the fact that it is the only course on OpenLearn that actually uses remotely operable equipment as part of the course. So we obviously need to do quite a bit of testing before the course went live, and then indeed even more afterwards, as I've just mentioned. So we decided to go for our ideal sort of target audience, given that a lot of the course's content is inspired by the GCSE astronomy course, and we approached some GCSE students, well, GCSE age students, because they're based in Scotland, so of course they don't do GCSEs, but nonetheless they are sort of 15, 16 years old. So were they in England, they would be doing GCSEs. From Denny High School, a school that my colleague Alan had a very good relationship with already, and they tested the course, gave us feedback on it, and produced the wonderful displays that you can see in these pictures. These filled their science corridor all the way down the length of it. And they took some amazing pictures, which, needless to say, they were very, very pleased with. So the end of week 4, as I mentioned, the objective is to produce images of the Messier objects. So on the left here, we've got the wonderful spiral galaxy M51, of course the Whirlpool, and then we've got the Edge-on M104 Sombrero galaxy here, and these are both images taken by the students during that testing phase. So overall, the course was extremely well received by them, which is great news, obviously. It proved the accessibility of the course to that particular age group, which is what we were targeting. Though, of course, it is open to absolutely anybody. But that was important for that age group because of the links to the GCSE astronomy course. And the reason that we really wanted to test with that age group, in addition to it being linked with the GCSE astronomy course, was the fact that the examining board, should you actually be doing that qualification, will accept the images taken during this course as part of the project work for the course. Now, when we asked the school and the students if they would be willing to help test the course, we never imagined it would have the impact that it actually did. The students were so incredibly enthusiastic about what they were doing. You've already seen the wonderful display that they made going down their corridor, their science corridor. But it just went in leaps and bounds, and it culminated in a trip that the students took to Tenerife. Now, I mentioned right back at the beginning that we were coinciding with this school trip. So we met up with the students for a day. They came up to the Teide Observatory. You can see the group of them there, along with the 3 teachers across the back, and myself in the pale cap there. And having spent the day going around the IAC headquarters at sea level and then up at the observatory during the afternoon, they then stayed at the observatory well into the early hours of the morning to actually do some naked eye observing for themselves, so they could see what a wonderful environment was. They were all extremely excited to finally meet the telescope that they'd built this relationship with and very much enjoyed using. And so, of course, being there overnight as well, they were able to see both Pirate and Coast undergoing their normal sort of nightly operations, which again caused a fair amount of excitement. Needless to say, being a school group going to a lovely island, they didn't just do astronomy whilst they were there. They did go and visit various sort of science museums and things, and they also had to go to other local water parks, of course. And they also met up with some Spanish school students as well to compare and contrast their experiences and their lives, which I think they found extremely interesting. Now, one sort of particularly huge achievement for these students was that a month or so after this trip, they went along to the meeting of Stirling Astronomical Society. So this is their local group up in Scotland, and they themselves gave a presentation about the course, about what it had been like to do the course. They talked about the images that they'd taken with the telescope, and then, of course, culminated in talking about this trip to Tenerife and thoroughly embarrassing their teachers as well with the weird and wonderful things they got up to, particularly at the water park. And quite a few of them are now saying that they very much like to pursue careers in science and engineering. A few are already working towards being STEM ambassadors. We're very much still in contact with them now, though, as I say, this trip was a year or so ago now. And it's really started something within the school, something that I must admit I'm extremely proud of. I never imagined that this course would have the impact that it has, because next year they are taking it a whole step further and are intending to go on a visit to NASA. I'm hoping to go with them, let's put it that way. So that's about it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you found it enlightening and not just a trip, me sharing my holiday photos. Got a few useful links here for you. So there's the Astronomy with the Online Telescope course itself. The full URL for the course is a mile long, so if you just go to the Open Learn website and use the search box on there, it's a lot easier. And then you've got the Coast website itself, telescope.org, which is, I must admit, undergoing quite a bit of modification at the moment. So please bear with us, but there's still some really interesting things on there. And just to prove to you, because I'm sure you're all extremely jealous of the wonderful environment that we have at the top of Teide there up at the observatory, just to prove to you that it isn't always ideal, I'd like to share a last picture with you that I took when I was busy kicking my heels around after about the third day, I think, of being completely enveloped in cloud. So I leave you with this, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Excellent. Good. Brings back happy memories of a few times I've been out to Tenerife myself and done some astronomy. So fantastic.
I thought it might.
So fantastic to see inspiring the younger generation as well, which is amazing. Absolutely brilliant. Right. Has anybody got any questions? I've allowed you to unmute yourself. So if you've got any questions for Joe, please fire away.
I've got one. So these are automatic telescopes, but how often do you need to actually do some maintenance on them and keep them in tip-top condition?
I'd say on average we're out there about once a year for a combination of doing routine maintenance, and also, of course, we do want to keep the telescopes at the forefront. So we're often, changing cameras, changing filters, etc. But yeah, as I mentioned, the next big one, when we're allowed to go, is going to be that massive upgrade. So the tube assemblies and the cameras and the filter wheels are all going to change at that point.
Busy time.
I ask a question, please, or a comment anyway. Visited Tenerife and Mount Teide 2018, January 2018. Went up there with Pete Lawrence from the Sky at Night on a photography jaunt up to the mountain. Did a few astro photos up there, which was brilliant. It was a lovely place. I'd love to go back there again. I managed to get on a trip to the observatory as well, which was good. And just one last thing, it's absolutely tipping it down here now.
It's passed over us now, so you've obviously got it.
Yeah, so I do want to go back to Tenerife at some point.
It is an absolutely idyllic place. It's wonderful. As I say, on that trip, which was one of my most recent, because I've been out there, where are we? 6 times, something like that.
All right.
Doing all the various bits and pieces, and of course multiple trips to Mallorca as well for the prototyping prior to that. And every single time, of course, I'd land, get in a car, drive up to the observatory, work up there, drive back down and fly out. So this latest trip, I thought, right, that's it. I actually want to see some of the island. So it was during that trip that for the very first time ever, I actually got to see some of the island.
Right.
And it is absolutely lovely.
Yeah. You can find the lava tubes, because there's a couple of lava tubes that not many people know about.
Oh,
so
wow.
you don't get anybody there, so you get it all to yourself, which is great. So
I went on the trip, on the same trip that I went to the observatory. I think it was we saw the craters of the moon landscape.
Yeah,
that was very, really good. You put some good photos of that.
Yeah, fantastic.
Love
it there.
I'm going to do a free plug for Joe's courses on the OU there. I have just completed, recently, the moons of the solar system. Having done the
yes, Dave Rothery's course.
Right.
Yeah, that's another absolutely brilliant one.
Yes.
There's Monica Grady's Orion course as well. It's another very good one. There's a whole series of astronomy courses on there, and they're all completely free.
Right.
I'll stick a link on the webpage.
I'll have a look at that.
The telescope course, I learned so much on there. It was amazing. It was like, yeah, great.
Thank you.
I'll say thank you to you.
Thank you very much. It's always good to receive feedback. I mean, I had someone contact me recently, sort of with a few, saying they'd enjoyed the course, thankfully, but also a few hints and tips on how to improve it. So it is certainly a course that I would describe as still evolving. So it's great to receive positive feedback. But Paul, should you want to get in contact, you are more than welcome to do so if you've got any hints and tips for further improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'll definitely have a look, because the only formal astronomy I've got is an O level when they were O levels.
Joe, I did the moons course as well. Very enjoyable, the Dave Rothery thing. Can you just explain what, regarding the Open University courses, the free course, what's the difference between Open Learn and Future Learn? I know it's not to do with your talk, but just curious if you could just explain this, because it was called Future Learn, but there's Open Learn as well. Is there a difference? Or? There
is, yeah. Open Learn is completely owned by the Open University. Right. And all of the courses that are on there are written by Open University academics. So they may be bespoke courses, such as this one, or they may be courses that represent little snippets of some of the undergraduate modules. So it can give you a flavour of what it's like to learn with the OU, should you be considering doing some more formal study with us. Future Learn is not owned by the Open University. I think it's owned by Harvard in the US. but the Open University is a partner with them. So there are other courses that the OU puts on there, but that's much more focused on, well, from the OU's perspective anyway, we focus much more on putting sort of more generic continuing professional development on there, as opposed to sort of academic teaching, if you see what I mean.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
What's I mean, during the summer months, we don't get any astronomical darkness up here. What sort of hours do you get down there during the summer? I've heard probably quite a few hours, I guess.
Oh
Yeah,
yes,
we do. Yeah.
Yeah, being much closer to the equator, it's pretty much a 50-50, 12-hour split all year round.
Ooh, my kind of
But because we are obviously up above the atmosphere, etc., we are significantly greater impacted by the moon.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit of give and take, but yeah.
Absolutely.
Any more questions? No? Well, thanks very much, Joe, for a brilliant talk. It's
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
it got me wanting to organise another trip out there again.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
especially as we were meant to be flying out to Corfu today.
Oh no!
Anyway, yeah. So it's got me wanting to go back and have a week astronomy up on the mountain.
It's very much at the top of my bucket list for post-pandemic.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, should you go on and do the course, I'd obviously be very pleased if you did. But do please feel free to give me some feedback. As I say, because I do consider it an ongoing project. I want to continue to develop it. And in fact, I'm pitching various ideas to the university at the moment for writing some additional courses on same sort of style to them as well. So a radio astronomy one, for example. So the more feedback that I get from the absolute perfect target audience, I think, would be very much appreciated.
Okay, brilliant. So I'll stick the links on the webpage and on social media in the morning.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dave.
So get those out. So thank you very much, Joe, for a great talk.
Thank you, Joe.
Hopefully,
Thank you.
Courses, and great to see the younger generation being inspired by it as well. Fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Anybody got anything that they'd like to say or share before we close for the evening?
Just to say that I'm doing my meeting tomorrow night with Julian.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my first one as Go Space Watch. That's tomorrow night at 7:30. And if you're interested, Julian, we've got just about 400 registrations.
Oh. Fantastic. Brilliant.
Looking forward to that one.
Yeah. Good luck with managing all those.
Yes. I think they'll be muted and video off as well.
Brilliant. Well, good luck. I thought it goes tomorrow because I'm doing the talk for CAA tomorrow. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can't make.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well,
Wednesday seems to be a popular night.
It does. Yes, it does. Yeah, because I think the Stargazers Lounge have got one tomorrow night as well.
Yeah, and don't the BAA have Wednesday meetings as
the
well?
BAA normally have a Wednesday webcast as well. Yeah, so Wednesday's very popular.
Yeah,
It's popular.
Okay.
Julian, I'll see you in about 10 minutes or so.
Okay. See you then.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming tonight. Thanks, Joe, for a great talk.
Thank
And
Thank you.
so keep
See you
safe,
all.
keep well, and keep looking up.
Yeah.
Cheers.
And keep dry.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Bye.